When you think about investing, stocks, real estate, even your retirement, what's the first emotion that hits you? For a lot of Christian leaders that I talk to, pastors, teachers, entrepreneurs, small business owners, it's not excitement, it's anxiety. When they think about investing, fear comes to their mind. Why? Well, you've worked so hard for what you have. You don't want to just gamble it away. You don't want to be reckless. You want to be a faithful steward. But here's the truth. Most people never tell you, you can be a wise, risk-aware Christian investor without living in fear. You can invest conservatively, sleep peacefully, and still see God multiply what He's entrusted to you. So today, we're going to build something together, your portfolio. If you want to, you don't have to, but I'm just going to suggest something for you, particularly if you're risk averse. And oftentimes when I talk to people, a lot of this depends on their age, right? Like if you're a little bit older, you're probably more risk averse. If you're younger, you're maybe willing to take more risk. And there are certain portfolios I could recommend to someone who's willing to take more risk. But today, I want to talk about those of you that are risk averse, a portfolio that fits your calling, your temperament, and your faith, something you can do without feeling like you're gambling, right? So let's talk first of all about the biblical foundation of conservative investing. Before we ever talk about ETFs, exchange traded funds, or real estate or treasury bonds, we've got to start with the why. The Bible is full of investment wisdom, right? Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." That's a principle of saving and preserving. Ecclesiastes 11:12 says, "Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land." I think that's a good principle of diversification. That you don't want to go all in on one thing, that if it goes bad, you're stuck. So diversification. And the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, it's not just about money, it's about stewardship. Their master expected growth, but he also expected wisdom, right? Jesus didn't praise the man who buried his money out of fear. He actually called that man, the master in the story, called that man wicked and lazy. Why? He didn't practice good stewardship. Now, notice he didn't tell him he had to take foolish risks. He didn't want them to be gambling it away. He wanted them to invest the money wisely. And that's what the faithful servant did, right? The 2 guys in that parable that invested wisely, they multiplied without gambling. That's what this conversation is about. How can you try to multiply your money, but in a way that's safe? We're not going to talk today about trying to hit the home runs and 10x your money in the stock market or something like that. Just faithful stewardship, not fear, not greed, faithfulness, because that's what's required of stewards, right? That a man be found faithful. So the problem with doing nothing, and here's what I see all the time among Christian leaders, they're great at giving, they're generous, they're hard workers, they support missions, they sponsor kids, they tithe faithfully, but they're terrified to invest. They say things like, "I don't want to lose it all. I'll just keep it in the bank." It's like they're thinking the safest thing to do with their money is to keep it in the bank. But here's the problem. Doing nothing is still doing something. Inflation is quietly robbing you every single year. Inflation is relatively high right now compared to the past decade, and we have come down from the 4, 5, and 6%, and we're at about 3% now. I know the government tries to target 2%, but probably if we stay at 3% for the next decade or so, and I'm recording this towards the end of 2025, we'd probably be happy staying at 3%. But even at 3% inflation, your $100,000 today will only buy $55,000 worth of goods in 20 years. That's not stewardship, that's slow erosion. I'm sure you've heard the saying, if your money isn't working for you, it's working against you. There's a lot of truth to that. So let's talk about the peaceful path, or if you want to call it this, the 3-part conservative portfolio. Okay, let's build what I call the Christian leaders portfolio, or the risk-averse Christian leaders portfolio, because again, there are other portfolios that I would recommend for someone who has a moderate risk tolerance or a high risk tolerance. But this particular portfolio I want to talk to you about is built on 3 pillars. Number 1, safety. That's probably music to your ears. Number 2, stability. And number 3, sensible growth. I even alliterated it for those of you pastors, and I have it in 3 parts. So safety, stability, and number 3, sensible growth. Now, quick disclaimer before we dive in. I'm not a licensed financial advisor. I'm not trying to make money off of this video. I'm just sharing ideas and principles that have helped me and other Christian leaders think wisely about stewardship. This video is for educational purposes only, so please do your own research or talk with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. And like they say, historic returns don't mean that it will do that in the future. So I'm going to tell you some things that have worked for me, and I'm not even super risk averse, so I do these things, but I do several other things that I'll probably talk about in another video. But I think these things are helpful, but again, you need to make your own decisions and don't say, well, that guy on YouTube told me such and such for sure would happen. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about the foundation of safety. Let's start with what I call the peace layer, right? The part that helps you sleep at night. Somewhere several years ago, I heard someone use the term SWAN stocks, capital S, capital W, capital A, capital N, and that's an acronym. The SWAN stands for sleep, S, well, A, W, at night, SWAN, sleep well at night. Swan stocks. I really liked that, so years ago I bought the domain swanstocks.com. I still haven't done anything with it, so if you think of good ideas for that domain, tell me in the comments below. But sleeping well at night, this is where treasury bonds and high yield savings accounts come in. U.S. treasuries are essentially loans to the federal government, and historically, in the history of the United States, they've never defaulted. So it's one of the safest things you can get. And right now, short-term treasury bills, 3 to 12 months, sometimes they're called T-bills, are paying between 4 and 5% interest right now. You can buy them directly at treasurydirect.gov without any middleman at all. If you're nervous about markets, the stock market, bond markets, you could park 30 to 40% of your portfolio in T-bills, treasurydirect.gov. That's your sleep well money. That's kind of a guaranteed, few percentage that should help you at least keep up with inflation, maybe a little bit better. You're not really trying to beat the S&P 500. Historically, the stock market, if you reinvest dividends, has done, at least in the past 50 years, like just over 11%. So you're not beating that, but you're trying to protect principal and earn modest, steady returns. So practical example, let's say you have $100,000 saved. You could put $30,000 to $40,000 in laddered 6-month and 1-year treasury bills. Okay, and you can do it at a ladder so that the returns come back to you every few months, right? So every few months, one matures, and you can decide whether to reinvest it in more treasury bills or redirect it somewhere else. It's kind of like planting low-risk trees that keep bearing fruit quietly for you. Okay, so that's the safety net. Then what I would call the core, or the stability layer, is, in many ways the heart layer, and that is a low-cost, diversified index fund. Okay. And I prefer these actually to mutual funds. This is where we join hands with some of the best investors in history. Particularly, I'm thinking of Jack Bogle, if you research the Bogle method and Bogleheads, and Warren Buffett. Buffett famously said, most investors, especially the nervous ones, and that's probably you if you're watching this video, risk averse, should own a low-cost S&P 500 indexed fund. Okay, that's Warren Buffett's advice. Even before he advises people to buy Berkshire Hathaway, the stock of his company that's just made people billions and billions of dollars. That's not speculation, it's diversification. An index fund is like buying the whole economy instead of guessing which company will win. You're not putting all of your eggs in Tesla or Amazon or Apple. You're owning the top 500 companies in the US across multiple industries. And the fees, and here's why I prefer it strongly to mutual funds, are almost nothing. Okay, Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity have index funds with expense ratios under 0.05%. Under 0.05%. That's so much better than most other means of trying to track the market. And you can start an account for free with Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, even Robinhood, if you like a simple little app and they give you a free stock to begin with. Start a free account and just invest in one of those index funds. So with a 0.05% expense ratio, that means for every $10,000 you invest, you're paying about $5 a year in management fees. Not $500, $5 for every $10,000. Now, my personal favorites, and again, take this for what it's worth, are VOO, the stock ticker VOO, that's the Vanguard S&P 500, and VTI, that's the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF. So it holds about, at any given time, about 3,500 stocks. So even the smaller companies, those are my favorite, VTI, Vanguard Total Index, or VOO. just to give you an example, the 10-year returns for VOO are really impressive. So this is that S&P 500 ETF, VOO. The annualized returns over the past 10 years, I looked this up, are 14.45% to 14.56%. In other words, like if you just look at the S&P 500 was up 0.8% today, that's what this stock will be up because it holds a little piece of all those top 500 companies, or VTI holds the top 3,500 companies in the US, right? So in 2024, if you just had money in VTI this is VOO, which is almost the same as VTI, but in VOO 2024, I think it made 24.98%, 2023, 26.32%. Those are really good years. 2022 is a really bad year. It lost 18.19%. 2021, it gained 28.78%. But if you tracked that over 10 years, you would on average have averaged 14.45% a year. Now, those are pretty good years, right? I tried to look back about 50 years. So if you reinvested your dividends, when you made dividends, you reinvested them, and I'll probably have another video about dividends. And if you owned the S&P 500 over the last 54 years, your return as of this month, October 25, would be 11.2% annually. That's from 1970 to 2024. Those were the numbers I tracked. Now, that's significant. You can put that in a calculator or whatever and see that 11% because of compounding interest would add up significantly. Okay, so back to our model. I'm saying, let's just say 40% if you're really safety conscious. I said 30 to 40%, but to be super safe, you could put 40% in treasuries. That's your safety, just trying to get a few percentage points, but no chance of loss. 50% in index funds. That's diversification. You're diversified across the whole stock market. And historically, you're probably going to grow, Lord willing, 10, 11% a year. Now, you'll have some years it will drop and other years it will go up. But just if you look at the historic averages, if you're in this for the long haul, it's very likely to go up. So that simple model, 40% treasuries for safety, 50% index funds, growth with diversification, and that leaves you 10% cash. And I'll just call that flexibility. You do want to keep some cash on hand, right? So if you did 40% treasuries, 50% index funds, historically, you're looking at around a 6 to 8% annual return with 10% of your money still in cash. That's way less volatility than picking individual stocks in the stock market. That means your money, if you could get 6 to 8% annually, your money doubles roughly every 10 years without you losing sleep at night. Now, I'll put in a little added bonus, and that's sensible real estate. This is what I might call the legacy layer, like assets you can actually touch. Real estate can be a great conservative investment if done wisely. Now, I'm not talking about flipping houses. I'm not talking about Airbnb speculation. I'm not talking about, all kinds of things that come across for accredited investors that are really quite risky. I mean simple, steady rentals, modest single-family homes in stable neighborhoods, paid off or financed conservatively, rented to long-term tenants. Let me give you an example. Carter's a Christian high school teacher living in the Midwest. He bought a $150,000 duplex. He lived in one side and rented the other for $950 a month. The rent covered his mortgage, and he was building out equity every single year. After 15 years, that duplex was worth $360,000 and paying him $1,400 a month. Now, that's not flashy. That wasn't 10xing. That wasn't some crypto investment, but it's faithful, right? Proverbs 13:11 says, "Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow." And I'm not saying someone that invests in crypto is dishonest. Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying conservative real estate is typically little by little, and there's a lot of tax benefits with it as well. So, avoiding some common mistakes. Let's talk about what not to do. Mistake number one is chasing fads. If everyone on TikTok or Instagram, if everyone on TikTok or Instagram is suddenly talking about the next big crypto, that's your cue to run the other direction. Proverbs 28:20 says, "A faithful person will be richly blessed, but one eager to get rich will not go unpunished." So you don't want to just be trying to win the lottery, so to speak. Mistake number two, neglecting liquidity. Don't tie up every single dollar. Keep some margin, because emergencies don't schedule appointments, right? So keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash or a money market fund that you can easily access. One nice thing about something like VOO or VTI is it is very easy to sell that, typically easily within 24 hours, depending on your brokerage firm. Third mistake, ignoring your spouse. If you're married, and many of you probably are, I've seen so many marriages where one spouse is financially anxious, fearful, concerned because the other made secret or reckless decisions. Don't do that. Money should unite you and your spouse, not divide you. So sit down and pray together about every major decision. Let's talk about the spiritual side of conservative investing. Here's what I love the most about conservative investing. It reflects God's character. God is steady. God is faithful. Now, I'm not saying if you want to be more aggressive in your investing that you're not being like God, because again, even personally, I'm much more aggressive than what I'm talking to you about. But if you're risk averse, and especially if you're maybe in your 60s, 70s, 80s, you probably should be risk averse, right? So God doesn't chase fads. When you build your finances on principles instead of emotions, in many ways, you're mirroring his nature. You're saying, Lord, I'm not trusting in markets, I'm trusting in you. Remember, the goal for all of us isn't to retire rich, is not to become a billionaire, or if you're still trying to become a millionaire, wherever you're at. It's to, even when we retire, and I'm not sure I like the idea of retiring, but to be available, right? To be available to serve, available for our church, available to give, available to pour into your children and grandchildren. When you invest wisely, you're not hoarding, you're positioning yourself for generosity. So let me end with this. If you've been afraid to invest, ask yourself, is it fear or is it faithfulness? Sometimes what we call caution is actually just fear all dressed up in a suit and tie, right? Start small. I mean, you could start with $500 or $1,000. Set up that Treasury Direct account. Open that low-cost index fund, even with a few $100. Pray before you invest, but don't bury your talent. You can be both careful and courageous. You can invest safely and also sleep peacefully, because stewardship isn't about chasing riches. It's about trusting God with the resources he's already placed in your hands. So go build your Christian leaders portfolio, even for risk-averse investors, one wise, hopefully peaceful step at a time. When your head hits the pillow tonight, you'll know this. You didn't gamble. You didn't hide. You stewarded to the best of your abilities. And again, the stock market might have a great year or it might have a horrible year. Maybe for the first time in the history of the United States, they'll default on T-bills, treasury bills. We don't know for sure. Maybe your bank would go under. You know, some people hide cash in their mattress. Someone could come in and steal it. So there is some level of risk that we live with, right? But if you invest to try to sleep well in God's economy, there's so much good that can come from that. Thanks so much for watching this. If you are a risk-averse investor, I understand that. Some of my best friends are very much that way, and some of my family members. So thank you again for your time, and I hope that this was helpful to you. If so, maybe leave a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel. Maybe consider sharing with someone else. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day rejoicing in Jesus.